you can't ever think like a cog in the wheel. You have to think like an owner. You start to think like a board member or the CEO. That will naturally guide you towards doing tasks a certain way, not focusing on things that don't add value, focusing on picking projects that you know could be big for the company, thinking creatively about how to address a competitive or a challenging situation, finding the people who are like-minded. So I would say, think like an owner.
Welcome to an all new episode of the Product Folks podcast. Today we have Dinkar Jain with us, who's the head of AI and marketplace at Uber. He was previously the head of ads AI business at Meta. His leadership has reached billions of people. He has managed hundreds of billions of dollars worth of businesses. So we are super excited to have him today. Joining me is Osho, who's the founder of Bombay Locale. They are one of the finest creative studios who make sleek ads for businesses. So great to have you, Osho, as well. Dinkar, welcome to India. Welcome to the Product Folks. Thanks for making time. I know you had an early flight today, but thanks so much for spending time with us. Our community has always been asking us to get someone who understands AI, understands products. So really grateful to have you here.
Excited to be here.
Amazing. Dinkar, I was personally curious about your journey. You started off as a software developer at Amazon to where you are right now, leading businesses worth multi-billion dollars worth of businesses, right? How does one start off as a developer and get to where you are? What are some inflection points that have helped you over the career?
So it's an interesting question. I would say that how one gets ahead in general has nothing to do with how you started or what you ended up doing, because the tech industry overall is an industry which does not care about titles or anything like that. Many of the biggest names in tech don't even have a college degree, right? And there are all these stories of people who never learned to code in school, but then started to code, and vice versa, and so on. So the biggest thing that matters is the desire to learn and the desire to take an opportunity and a risk when it presents itself. The second biggest thing that matters is people who believe in you, who want to lift you up. So if you can do that, if you can do both those things, anybody in any field, I think, can keep rising.
How do you go about finding these people who can take a bet on you?
You have to continuously work to impress upon them that you can be producing extremely valuable results. There has to be a natural liking and a chemistry that human beings need to develop with each other to the point where they want to sponsor you or promote you up. And then you have to believe in yourself that yes, if you take on a riskier bet or a bigger bet, you'll be able to deliver outstanding results. So if you can match that,
right?
Anybody, there's lots of formulas to success. This is the simplest and the most honest one.
Absolutely. And getting foot in the door is one thing, but once you are inside, rising up through the ranks is another thing, right? So how do you go about the second part?
So one of the things that is important for people to understand, especially people who are starting out, right? Which is perhaps many people in the audience, is you can't ever think like a cog in the wheel. You have to think like an owner. So you have to ask yourself, what can I do at work today that will increase the market cap of the company? You start to think like a board member or the CEO. That will naturally guide you towards doing tasks a certain way, not focusing on things that don't add value, focusing on picking projects that you know could be big for the company, thinking creatively about how to address a competitive or a challenging situation, finding the people who are like-minded, who want to do big things at the company,
right,
and so on and so forth. So I would say, if you think like an owner, that's how you should always think, no matter how early or late you are. Even when you walk into an interview at a company, think like an owner.
Owner, absolutely.
And many people actually don't do that.
Right. Anything specific you would recommend to build up the mindset specifically, right? Because we all read about it, we all hear about it, but if I'm in a company, but I want to put myself in the shoes of a CEO, how do I implement that mindset in my day-to-day work?
If you want to practice thinking like an owner, the best advice I have is read an article in a reputed publication which describes a business situation. Okay.
So business cases or
No, just an article, not a huge case, and say, okay, why? Let's have a debate with myself about why that person took this action, or why this business did this or that, right? And why this business is in this situation.
right.
So yesterday's news, Intel stock just dropped 30%, just crashed.
Yeah.
Intel is a storied company of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Right?
3,000 people were fired.
So ask yourself the question, what mistakes did Intel make over the last 5 years that have got them to this point?
Yeah.
Even if you have nothing to do with hardware,
Yeah.
ask yourself that question. If you can find the answer, great. If you can't, read 6 things and say, okay, can I now credibly walk into an Intel board meeting and discuss it?
Yeah.
And so it's just like practice. So the more you practice, the more you start thinking about it. And you may have nothing to do with hardware. You may not know anything about chips.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And so the more you do that, so every day read, the business world is full of fun news. Read it, process it, think about it, and see what you have to say. And the more you practice analyzing all of these situations on the fly, the more you will learn to think like a CEO. Because you're asking a CEO level question of yourself, and you're spending minutes of your day thinking like a CEO, right? And that's what matters. Or thinking like an owner, I would rather say. Because even CEOs sometimes act like employees.
Yeah, I was about to ask this later in the interview, but since you mentioned this, any key resources that come top of mind that you often visit, or any key, I saw your LinkedIn and noticed that you read tons of books all the time. Any top resources that come to mind that people should keep an eye out?
Not really, because it depends on what you want to keep an eye out for.
Right.
But in almost every field, you will find that there are the top 2 or 3 sources that have not yet been polluted by mediocrity.
Yeah.
And you should try and focus your information diet in the highest fidelity
Right.
sort of news sources or sources in general of information. That's important.
Makes sense.
Your information diet you must control, as much as possible. It's better to have no information than bad information.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, what I got from this dialogue which we are having right now is, you are suggesting people to be really, really curious, right? Once they're curious about something, they'll go into those rabbit holes and then start owning things. How does one remain curious?
You should. I mean, there's no. I don't have a personal secret to it. Maybe I was born that way, but in general, if you are restless about where the world is, and if you are restless about why this is this way and why not another way, then curiosity is a natural ally, and you will use curiosity as a tool to change status quo, right? So I think maybe the underlying intention or the underlying fire has to be that the world as it is will not be good enough, and it must change and it must progress. If you subscribe to that, then you will naturally, I think, be curious. So you'll be forced to be curious about why things are the way they are and how they can change.
So I think another addressing the elephant in the room right away, AI in product, right? We all kind of have been hearing about it since a couple of years now. We all know that it's going to bring a huge technological shift in literally, like we were chatting earlier, it's a horizontal layer which will sit on top of literally everything that we do, right? If I'm a product person right now, I probably have some idea about what AI is. I probably use ChatGPT to some extent at my work. What are some things that I can do to probably hone my skill set and be better equipped, say, a few years down the line, to ensure that I make the most of this technological shift, right? What are some things that you would recommend? I'm keeping it fairly broad right now, would love to know your thoughts, but this is something that a lot of people in the community are curious about, right? That what are some actionable steps I can take, right? Either day to day or maybe say on a 3 to 4 month, 6 month roadmap that I can at least get started. And then obviously once you get started, you go into that rabbit hole. But what would you recommend?
Let me answer your question in two parts. One, giving a bit of an overview of
Right.
product management overall,
Right.
historically,
Right.
and second, about what you can do specifically
Yeah.
about AI. So if you go back maybe 20, 30 years, when HP was producing inkjet, deskjet
Yeah.
printers, I'm sure HP had a product manager for printers and a product manager for cartridges,
Yeah.
right? Now, obviously, the technology they were dealing with and the product they were selling and its value prop had nothing that looked like AI-driven software services or consumer products. Today,
Right.
right? They were not, oil and water. They're totally separate things.
Yeah.
So, product management as a discipline always changes when the technology paradigm changes, and the technology paradigm has been changing. From hardware like PCs and printers to
Internet when they happen.
internet to desktop to laptops to mobile phones to mobile apps to cloud to AI. So we've had, and within AI there's so there's all these waves of technology change, and the job of a product manager has to, if you put it in historical perspective, a good PM has to keep
Adapting
abreast with it, right? And you have to keep adapting to it. However, some aspects of the PM's job are evergreen.
Yeah.
You have to still sell a product or a technology that solves a problem to a consumer, or for a consumer or a customer, and you have to do it better than your competitors. And you
Yeah.
have to have a perennial source, of competitive advantage if you're going to create a successful product that will last. So those things don't change. Just how you get competitive advantage, what the technology is, what problems you can solve with it, does the consumer feel happy with it or satisfied
Yeah.
with it? Those are the things that change. But the fundamental framework of how a PM has to synthesize value doesn't really change.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one thing that people should take comfort in, that don't go crazy just because AI is here.
Yeah.
It's just another thing.
Thing,
And
yeah.
I'm sure in 6 months, especially the rate at which the field is moving,
Right.
we'll be talking about something else.
Yeah.
Right? Like Gen AI itself will cap out pretty quickly here. Okay, so now what should you think about that is AI specific
Yeah.
as you adapt, while being calm about the fact that this adaptation is normal?
Right.
So what you have to understand is that consumer attitudes towards AI and AI products are not formed yet.
Yeah.
People are still learning how to depend on AI products
Right.
and how to use them.
Yeah.
Right? So you can learn a lot by studying consumers and how they like to interact
Right.
with AI products.
Yeah.
The way in which a product is competitively positioned
Yeah.
has a lot to do with how much data your company has or
Absolutely.
your product can collect. So you would be remiss to think about your product strategy without thinking about your data strategy.
Yeah.
Right? There is a unique economic thing that is going on right now where GPUs are very expensive and some of these big cloud providers are quite expensive.
Right.
And they are cornering much of the profit in the industry. So you have to think about, like, are the economics there even for the application you're thinking about to make it really happen?
Right.
So I would say if you were to apply the craft of product management to AI, focus a lot on what is the consumer attitude? Is the consumer problem actually being solved with AI, or are we just kidding ourselves? And then focus a little bit on the competitive physics of how you're setting up the application. Make sure your data strategy is crystal clear. And third, make sure the economics actually make sense.
Makes sense.
The value add has to be so much bigger than the cost of doing this.
The
AI
ROI is
stuff,
justified, yeah.
That don't venture into all these low ROI spaces because they sound hyped up. Right?
Hyped up,
like
yeah.
that would not be wise.
Yeah. I think you mentioned an interesting point there. Like, you rely on a lot on data and probably huge amounts of data, especially if you want to do something significant in AI. But a lot of companies that are just starting out, or PMs who are probably in companies which are fairly early stage, right? They might not have the privilege of having massive data pools, right? How can they go about thinking of either using AI or making their work a lot more efficient with the use of AI to build better products?
So if you think about the fact that many AI products are available off the shelf now, where they've used all kinds of other data sources to bring something that you can then use. So using those AI tools is available, even if you're a startup.
Right.
So like a startup not using some coding co-pilots is probably going to spend more on engineers than it needs to, right? So that's some area where you should use it right away.
Right.
Now, in terms of getting access to large amounts of data, many companies, especially in the SaaS space, are able to have proof of concepts with different customers who will then share their data with them so that they can run their AI insights onto them or AI models on their data sets and then provide value back. So you sometimes approach it from the fact that you're able to bring a technology to the table,
Right.
which that company as a customer doesn't have, but they have the data. And then the technology and the data, you should be able to get it to work.
Married together.
So that's another approach. And then lastly, there are many public data sources. You don't have to look very far. ChatGPT read the internet, right? So if you can create ChatGPT without having any proprietary data, I'm sure many startups are possible without any proprietary data.
Yeah, absolutely. Osho, I know you since you're in the space which is about video content creation, and we all know like generative AI is going to have a massive impact on it, right? What is your take on it? Like, how do you think you'll adapt to a world where you might have to rely on a lot of AI tools, a lot of AI capabilities, right? So how are you thinking about it? And then I would love to know your thoughts as well on the same thing. So
Essentially, like we call ourselves a filmmaking startup.
yeah,
That's what we have always wanted to do.
yeah,
And filmmaking is more like it's an operational problem
yeah,
than a creative problem.
right,
It is creative. It is a creative problem up until things are on paper. Like you have a script, you have a screenplay, you have a storyboard. After that, it's a OR problem.
yeah,
Now, with the advent of AI, we hear a lot of people on Twitter here and there that this is going to disrupt this is going to disrupt that, and they are correct to say that.
yeah,
They can have their opinion. What I feel about it, like we use all these AI tools.
yeah,
We use 11 labs when some of our recordings go wrong.
yeah,
We sometimes, if we have to tinker with an idea, we use ChatGPT because it solves your head start problem.
yeah,
But as far as creativity is concerned, even if AI is there, creativity becomes costlier
yeah,
than it getting cheaper. AI is good for videos if you have to have those videos which are short shelf life,
yeah,
which will go in like 3 days, 2 days. But they cannot be high value production. But so many tools are there which we use at Bombay Local to sort of figure out smaller elements.
right,
If I have to think about a music, a track for an ad. Now, earlier, even today, we go on art list, look at a lot of small sound pieces,
yeah,
pick them all together, and then put it on our lineup,
yeah,
like the video lineup. Now, I can tinker those
right,
before.
right,
So essentially, the search problem, the head
yeah,
start problem
hashtag
is
problem,
one.
right, makes sense.
So, like, we have to be on top
Top of it.
what AI is doing. We ourselves use all these tools. So, like, it's necessary.
Necessary to, yeah, absolutely. Dinkar, since even now you are on the consumer side of things, right? You see how AI applications or AI within, say, specific very small features or something that can be present org-wide, right? How do you think about this problem? How do you go about creating specific solutions which the consumer might not even realize that it's AI, right? They honestly don't care whether what the underlying solution is. How do you go about thinking about something like this?
Yeah, so I'll offer a framework for this. So Osho's startup is a bunch of experts in the, I would say, in the video and film space. And AI is good for helping experts.
Right.
Gen AI tools in particular are good for helping experts. I don't actually know if I believe yet that the Gen AI tools are great for the masses who are not experts at some particular task. And the reason I say that is that, like so many people tell me nowadays, oh, look at ChatGPT or look at all these Gen AI models. They have clearly won over the Turing test, because you can't tell the difference between a human and a computer, etc. I'm like, well, maybe that's kind of true, but like the more important thing that I puzzle over is that if you don't have an expert mind responding to and using all of these suggestions, then I'm very worried about what comes if you deploy those suggestions. Because these systems don't have any guarantees of accuracy. Like if you ask them to write 6 paragraphs, there'll be a lot of repetition all over the place. Some things will be slightly inaccurate. Hallucinations are talked about a lot, but that's one of the problems. There's many problems in what these things are producing.
Right.
In the image and the video space, you know that there are many things that are completely inaccurate that the human eye may not even notice, but they're there as problems. So I do believe that these are not consumer ready in the classic sense. What they are ready with is helping experts get some productivity by giving them suggestions or shortcuts that would be helpful. So in that sense, and what's weird is that the pace of these AI systems is so high that every 3 months, the system, its behavior and its performance changes.
Right.
So let's say you had an assistant that was helping you do whatever task, and you're bonding with that assistant to the point where you guys now have, a pattern so that it's efficient. You don't have to say everything to make it work. You understand each other so you can get stuff done faster. Within 3 months, there's churn. That assistant's gone, you have a new one. And the new assistant has their own strengths and weaknesses, their own personalities, their own quirks, and they have no idea how you work. So it's very dangerous for, like, imagine if you're a school teacher and you're using an AI model to teach, you develop your lectures on a subject, and every 2 months there's a new AI model sitting there and you blindly keep using it the same way. I don't know what you'll teach, right? So there's a huge problem here where these systems don't come with any guarantees, any backward compatibility, any safety measures, and so on and so forth. So while sure, you can save 5 hours creating a lesson plan, if you're a teacher in this example, I don't know if that's actually reliable in the way that we need it to be, right? And it's not like we know that version 5 is more reliable than version 3 in any of these models. It's just a different model. So there's no independent way to evaluate whether it's actually more reliable or less, or more accurate or less. So it's an assistive technology where an expert needs to review and judge, and it's actually more difficult because it's given you something that sounds decent enough. It's actually more difficult to go in and override it. And you need a very independent mind that's more attuned to what is tastefully good or correct, to overrule it and override it. So I actually feel that, it's a little bit premature for it to start to take mass scale dependency on. As a society, we should not be taking big dependencies on these systems.
Absolutely.
The errors are too large. The
reliability is a challenge.
Reliability is a challenge, and the quality of what they're producing is very pedestrian in some cases. Like Jan LeCun at Meta always says, like, these AI systems have the intelligence of a house cat. Right? So why would you trust a house cat to teach your high schoolers a lesson? Right? Well, you wouldn't. Right? So that's the problem. But these tools are getting out there. They're in the hands of millions of people, and they're using it for all kinds of things. It's a little bit worrisome.
Right, and you spoke about Meta, and they have been like the pioneers. They built PyTorch since more than a decade back, and you have been seeing this space for quite a while now. Even in your earlier role, you were building products, leading teams, which had a fair bit of AI in them, right? How has that shift happened? Like, how were the earlier days like? What were the kind of, because when something becomes a trend, when something becomes like, when something gets into the limelight, a lot of things get frothy, right? But in the earlier days, you were solely seeing it for the use case, and you were probably using it for that specific use case rather than, like you said, whether AI is solving a problem or not doesn't matter anymore, right? People kind of just go in any direction just to have AI in their products. So how did the early days look like And what are the changes that you have seen over the last decade in this space?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I'm sure there are many AI historians out there, and even though the history is only, well, actually the history is quite old. The first AI system was in the 50s or the 60s, I forget, but supposedly AI system. But like AI for real, the history is about 15 years old. And you know, I would say the first exposure I had to it at length was in Google search. And at Google search, the philosophy very much was to use human understandable queries and results to understand, you know, to weigh whether we are serving the query better or worse. So search quality as a discipline. And semantic understanding or AI models that understood human concepts were important for that.
Right.
Then came the deep learning era, and Meta very much grew up in the deep learning era of Facebook at the time. And there it was just add more layers to the neural networks, and good stuff will happen. And you know, and just make sure the supervision is right. So that was anchoring a little bit away, much more away from human judgment, just letting all the work happen in neural networks, and just make sure the supervision is really high, you know, high quality and high volume. And then, of course, now we have this Gen AI world where we are talking about a totally different paradigm in supervised learning to some extent. If you think about these three sort of phases, the overall human involvement in a particular AI task has gone drastically down, but it already went down quite a bit with deep learning.
Yeah.
So the thing was, in the Google world, in the search world, in the old search world, not the current one, it was very much that human judgment was baked into the system in a very serious way. In the deep learning world, that became less important, right? But supervision was very key, and generalization was not trusted. And in this world, in the Gen AI world, we are assuming that we can generalize really well. So we can transfer learn across domains, and we can generalize.
Generalize, yeah.
And so, so those have been the evolutionary arcs. And so if you look at the early days, you know, we were trusting the technology a little bit, like gingerly, putting a lot of human judgment, baking it in. Then we said, okay, the framework's pretty robust. Let's deep learn the hell out of everything and like keep adding layers and data. And now we're saying, okay, maybe we can trust it with more. Go run, right? You know, like now the other thing to think about is that much of AI evolution has come out of Silicon Valley and some of these big consumer internet companies. And the problem phenotypes in these consumer internet companies are very unique. So you have billions of data points. They're essentially free. They don't have to pay for them, right? And you can use that large amounts of data for all kinds of AI work, right? And they have huge gross margin businesses, so you have a lot of money to spend on compute and so on. Now, I used to be involved quite closely with a biotech, a very important biotech venture in the community in Boston. And there, if you look at biotech AI problems, the entire problem spec is different. You don't have billions of data points. You know, you have hundreds, maybe thousands. Each data point is crazy expensive to collect. You have to do a lot of lab work before. So one other thing I forgot to mention, the cost of an error in consumer internet companies is not that high.
That's true.
You can show somebody the wrong ad or the wrong search result, it's not a big deal, right? In biotech, the cost of an error is really high. You pick the wrong molecule, you'll spend $1 billion on a clinical trial, you know, really badly affect the health of various patients.
It can be fatal in many cases, yeah.
And you'll waste another 5 years of drug development for that disease, right? So the consequences are crazy. So the problem phenotypes are, and these biotech companies or pharma companies don't have these massive gross margins.
Right.
So the problem phenotypes are different. The way you do AI should be different.
Yeah.
Right? Think about a newly born baby deer, right? It's required that they start to run within a few minutes of being born.
Yeah.
Right? Otherwise, the wild will not be nice to them.
Right.
So that's not a brain that's doing backprop with infinite data points and figuring out how to run.
Yeah.
That's a brain with a strong sense of priors. And so how AI needs to evolve for different human problems is not the same as it has been evolving, because AI has been uh, applied, and the problems that are being posed are very endemic
Yeah.
to a certain set of economic and human applications. So in that sense, the AI technologies and paradigms we have don't really quote unquote generalize to all the other problems to which humanity can apply AI.
Right.
Right. So if you look at the question of early days or late days, I still think it's really early days.
Oh.
Because there are so many areas in which we need to apply AI as human beings that we haven't yet applied it to. And the way we have to think about solving those problems with AI are not going to be the same way in which we have solved consumer internet problems with AI. And because attention, money, brains are all flowing into consumer internet because of the economic virtuous cycle, you know, it's not like we're making a lot of progress in those other types of ways of applying AI. And before we get too further along, it's important to just define this concretely. So machine learning was a paradigmatic shift in programming, right? Where traditional programming was you give a machine explicit instructions. If this, then that. For I equals 1 to 100, do this, right? Every time the machine runs, it will do exactly the same thing. Machine learning is, the definition is, it's a function, just like a programmatic function, but it's programmed with data. It's not programmed with instructions.
Right.
So you tell the machine, here's a bunch of data, try and solve this problem, right? That's it. And AI is just more like, AI is of course a very vague term.
Yeah.
Like machine learning is more credibly defined.
Right.
So that is all it is. So you can program a lot of things with data and other things.
Right.
And you can try and solve multiple different problems with it. And so if you look at the way that the AI waves are evolving, countries, verticals, industries, domains, problems, they all have to be thought about much more openly than the way the royalty of AI today is solving it. Because they're solving a very small slice of the potential of AI.
Just to follow up on what you just said, so there could be applications of AI in verticals, in industries, maybe even in countries. So say for example, a large country like India, we have 140 crores people, and many of them do not have a hospital nearby or doctor nearby. But the problem is very small. It could be solved by maybe teleconsultation, but that too is not available. Just giving an example. So how should a founder or somebody who wants to get started in this field think about applications of AI for a problem statement like this?
Okay, it's a very good question. So before we get to the problem statements, let's try and understand what is AI good at, right? What are its strengths? What is new that it brings to the table? So a few things. Number one, let us say you have an AI system that has looked at 1 billion X-rays.
Okay.
Right? And it has read the radiologist reports that have accompanied those billions of pictures. That is more X-rays than any human doctor will ever read in their lifetime, maybe 100 lifetimes. Now, if that AI system is good at learning from that, it will actually learn a lot more than anybody can learn in a university, even if they go to a university for 50 years. And cumulatively, they will keep collecting more. That AI system will collect more and more data. Now, healthcare can be a controversial example because of various reasons, but think about navigation.
Yeah.
Today, nobody thinks that they know better how to predict an ETA
than Google Maps,
than a centralized software like Google Maps or something that collects that data and has done that job and failed and tried and refined that job. So they have driven, Google Maps, for example, as a central intelligence unit, has driven throughout Bombay much more than maybe anybody living in Bombay today.
Yeah.
Right? And by a magnitude of thousands or tens of thousands. So one thing that AI systems are great at is collecting vast amounts of experience that is not possible for a human being to do. Another thing AI systems are great at is processing data or connections between data that a human mind doesn't have enough capacity to correlate or understand. right? Because we cannot keep so many variables in our head. But an AI system can keep thousands of variables in its head, and reason across them and find correlations amongst them. Those could be surprising correlations to us, and they can lead to insights. So there are things that the AI systems are good at. And those are where I would say that AI systems have comparative advantage, right? And the difference between humans and machines, and what machines should do versus humans should do, or other, like that has always kept shifting throughout history. Before the printing press or the Industrial Revolution, everything was handmade, books were handwritten. That technology shifted the boundary of who has the comparative advantage. So after that, machines were preferred to publish books, not human scribes, and so on. So if you think about it in that continuum, the AI advances shift the boundary of comparative advantage in some new types of tasks. One of these tasks happen to be delivering human judgments, certain types of human judgments, at zero marginal cost. Like I said about predicting ETAs, right, for a particular route that you might be taking. Now, if you can get to the point where certain types of healthcare diagnostics or healthcare tasks resemble, because they can be fed so much data that you can get them to the way we trust Google Maps today for all kinds of things. If you can get healthcare tasks to that same sort of level of trust or adequate level of trust, that means you can deliver that healthcare task for free at extremely high accuracy. And so that is how an entrepreneur needs to think. They need to think about what are the new things that get unlocked with ML or AI in terms of shifting this comparative advantage boundary. Then what are the things that society is still doing as if this boundary never moved, and then create the company to move it for real.
Yeah,
right?
like for simpler tasks like any consultation which can be solved just by talking to a doctor on a phone.
So basically you need the consultation to be non-complex. So sometimes doctors, because they have context of the patient, may have a 2-minute conversation, but it may be a fairly complex one, right? So you need something to be repeatable, formulaic, based on where the data set has enough information for the AI system to reason with it, and so on. So there are maybe other attributes that will emerge of how a healthcare task can be done with an AI system sufficiently and credibly. But yes, in general, the spirit of your thrust, the thrust of what you're saying is absolutely spot on. And by the way, in a country like India, many people don't even have access to a doctor at all. So having an access to a systemic doctor, like an AI systemic doctor, if they're reasonably accurate, is some things better than nothing, sort of a thing. It can unlock an elevation in standard of living for a large amount of people in the world, large number of people in the world, because all of a sudden they can have access to services that the infrastructure around them otherwise doesn't provide them, right? And you are seeing this already in India with companies like PhysicsWala and all that, where they are doing this for education and teaching, which was always thought to be a very human-centric
use case,
like task.
We were talking about healthcare example earlier. You spoke about a biotechnology company, right? All of these can have like serious implications on people's lives. So you earlier led a team on building responsible AI products, right, at Meta, and this is a fair concern. This is a valid concern. But if I, as a product builder, when I use ChatGPT right now or I use Midjourney right now, I can't honestly extrapolate whether how something like this could be harmful, right? Because I'm simply generating a result. I'm using it in my day-to-day work. I might not be able to comprehend what my actions could lead to, right? So if I'm a product builder right now, how do I think about building responsible AI products? What are some early red flags or early things I should consider while building products to ensure that I'm building it responsibly?
It's a very rich question. So if you're a product manager or an inventor or an entrepreneur, and you're thinking about using AI in a way that could be sensitive or dangerous, or potentially dangerous. So number one, some of these harms that AI systems cause get surfaced when the product is at sufficient scale. So nobody should sit there on day one of their startup or day one of their product and list out the 5,000 ways it could be bad, right? You have to try and figure out how to get to 5 users at least before harms can start. But so your attention to harms, in my view, should be proportionate to the scale you're developing. And as you start to scale, you should start to focus on harms more and more so that you can make sure that your product is being extremely responsible in the world. Right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. There are various ways in which AI systems, again, just to understand the technology of comparative advantage, you should also look at the comparative disadvantages of AI. So AI systems by definition are probabilistic and or uncertain. So there is no guarantee in how they will predict or solve a certain situation. So because of that, you have to know that if the prediction is wildly wrong, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Can one predict that?
No, but you can imagine that, right? So if, for example, you're using AI to predict the weather and India is playing cricket tomorrow, then the worst thing that could happen is the match won't happen.
Okay.
And a lot of people go home disappointed. That's a terrible outcome, but that's the worst case scenario if you predict sunshine and it rained. Now, you have to be okay with the worst case scenario, right? You have to be saying, okay, it'll be terrible, but am I okay to accept that level of terrible? So if you start using AI systems to do weapons or life and death decisions in hospitals, are you okay with that one patient for whom you may make the wrong decision? Or not? We don't feel we're okay. Are you okay with the one target that drone attacks that we don't think is the right target and kills a few civilians there that can be avoided? I don't think we're okay with that. So we have to judge that what is the most terrible outcome that is possible, and are we okay with it? If we're not okay with it, don't take a dependency on an AI system.
Okay.
Do it by hand, do it in the old school programming way, or do it by human, right? Like by human judgment. Don't take a dependency on an AI system. That's just purely irresponsible. So there are types of tasks or jobs in the world that you're okay with the most terrible outcomes. Maybe weather prediction is one of them, for example, or ETA prediction. If you're off by 20 minutes, it's not like, so usually it's okay. So you'll be like, fine. So those are the types of tasks you should use AI systems for. So the number one job of a responsible product manager is to pick the right task. Don't use AI for something that it should not be used for.
Yeah.
Okay. Second, once you're at scale, try and understand what are the implications of your AI system on people. So let's say you're a gaming company, a video game company, and you use ML and AI to make it really, really, really addictive, or really, really, really engaging. Let's use that word, right? Are you comfortable with it going over a certain level, right? Let's say you are a company that, and people talk about the fact that certain recommendation systems, for example, like YouTube, hook people in and they waste a bunch of time and so on. So are you really okay with those kinds of consequences on people? Certain recommendation systems are getting people to start believing certain things that are completely wrong because they keep reinforcing false messaging or whatever that is there on the platform. Is that a societal outcome that you're comfortable with? So you have to start thinking about the fact that are these societal outcomes in general things that I can curtail or limit? And how do I curtail or limit them when I start to see these harms pop up at scale, right? And those are usually the after effects of success, wild success. So I would say, number one, make sure you don't pick the wrong task. And then number two, think really carefully about if you're wildly successful, what could be the adverse consequences on people, and how do you put guardrails on them? Those are the two general things that I would apply.
I would rather follow up on this a little differently. So what you're saying is, essentially, your morality has to be alive to see what wrong it could do.
Yes.
But in a world where, any technology as such will be built with VC cash mostly. So, where's the limit? Where's the limit?
I don't know if there are any VCs in the audience, but I'll tell you a story about this, okay? So there was a scientist, I think his name was Claire Patterson.
Okay.
He was at Caltech. I think this is the story of the 60s or the 70s. At that time, all of gasoline in the US had lead in it. And he found out that lead is correlated with cancer and causes cancer. And he published papers on this and so on. The entire oil lobby, which is not VC backed, went after him. And for 10 years, they tried to ruin and discredit his academic career and this, that, and the other. And it took the US Congress 10 years to ban lead from gasoline.
Okay.
And by the way, it didn't cost the oil companies that much to take lead out. They just didn't want to do it. And they had all these universities and professors at universities publishing papers that lead is fine, it's harmless. Okay? In the United States, where universities are supposed to be credible, the US Congress inquiries are supposed to be truth-seeking, right? So it's the rub of capitalism and ravaged capitalism that is immoral, etc. The rub of that against what's right and what's moral is not a new phenomenon. It's not a startup phenomenon. It's not an AI phenomenon. It's a very, very ancient phenomenon.
Yeah.
And so I would say whatever mechanisms societies have evolved to handle that and try and strike the right balance between those mechanisms, we have to continue to do that, right? It's just a new spin on the same old thing. What gives me hope is that the people involved with AI and with technology tend to be more idealistic. They tend to be younger, and so less jaded or less, focused on, like the new age values of being idealistic and do no evil and making a big impact. Like we're seeing this in my teaching in business schools, that most of the applicants that are coming to business schools nowadays are much more focused on purpose than careers, right? So I think globally, the people getting involved with technology are purer at heart, and that's a good thing. So I do think capitalism overall is evolving to a more heartfelt place, which is needed and important. And I hope that that also helps these AI systems and all of their potential downsides. Like lead in gasoline is about as black and white as you can get about this, right? And that was so difficult. So I think we'll be okay. Right?
Yeah. And do you have a question?
Yeah. We also had a conversation about like data being the new labor. Not exactly data, created content by people or some kind of behavior on consumer. So how does that translate? Because all these models are trained on some human behavior, or it's a piece of content written by them, it's a research paper, it's some Reddit post. It is something done by a human being in the past. It like 1,000 years of recorded history maybe. So now we are creating more and more content. For a country like India, again, we create the most content. Give it to low data cost, give it to low cost of mobile phones. So how do we as Indians gain from it? Like if there was a World Cup related to AI and if we Indians have to bring it home, how do we do that?
Look like? Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. So you know how in India we've always talked about a demographic dividend?
Yeah.
Right? There is such a thing as a data dividend. Because our population now, I think, has the most number of internet connected people in the world that are in a democracy, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Sure.
And we're generating all kinds of digital data sets, right? And that is, if you think about the old school concept of factors of production, where you need raw materials, labor, land, and capital to produce a unit of GDP, if you want to produce an AI product or an AI service, the biggest ingredient for that is data, right? So you have a data dividend of whatever hundreds of millions of people connected to the internet producing data that can then be used to produce AI GDP in a way that no other country actually has.
Yeah.
Right? And so we are set up, like the Indian economy and the Indian polity is set up to take real big advantage of this, just like we talked about the demographic dividend many, many years ago. So it would be important for us to realize that the AI economy, who has the data has all of the power, right? As you're seeing now, even with the models, they're becoming very commoditized. We have open source competitors of ChatGPT that are kind of very close, right? Coming out of Meta and Llama 3 and so on. So the modeling piece is not the competitive advantage. The competitive advantage is who has the data and who owns the data. And so, and if, like you rightly said, the most digital netizens in the world are sitting inside India, and therefore they are going to be the ones generating most of the data. And so the Indian economy should get a boost, because it's almost like you're sitting on the largest reservoir of gold in the
Oil.
world,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
oil in the world, right?
Yeah.
This is the biggest asset in
Asset.
the world if you think about it.
And just expanding from there, right? What can I do as an individual in this growth journey, right? Consider me as a product builder or a business owner, or probably someone who generates jobs, or someone as small as maybe building a feature for a product in a startup, right? What can I as an individual do to be a part of this growth journey?
So I would say you should just be very familiar with AI, get to practice with AI as much as you can, apply it in different situations, be around companies and founders and leaders who think about AI all day long. And just like anything else, the more you practice in the field, the better you get at it.
Right.
And the field is evolving so fast that you want to be as close to the frontier as possible, right? So try and go for companies and environments that are trying to do the latest thing in AI. And the beauty is today, information flows so fast that everybody has access to the same information about AI pretty quickly compared to like even 10 or 15 years ago. There's a general openness about everybody wanting to share and show off what they're doing in the AI world. So you can get a lot of content sitting anywhere that is very relevant, very topical, very deep, and very credible. So I think there's no substitute for getting in and hacking and getting in and brainstorming and getting in and participating. And just like there was literacy, and then there was numeracy, and then organizations started talking about data literacy, we're going to talk about AI literacy. All right. Exactly. And by the way, no matter who you are, if you're a marketer, you need to understand AI, because that's how all of your ads are running. If you are a leader of a company, if you get up on a lectern and lecture your workforce, well, guess what? Your robots aren't listening. And 50 to 60% of your company's work is being done by AI systems in the future.
Or some automation.
How are you going to provide them your perspective and inspire them to respond to your leadership, right? You have to lead your models. You have to provide leadership to your models. Companies build relationships with you as consumers. That's called branding. Branding is no longer about the fantastic lobby and the well-dressed staff and the courteous staff at the Taj Hotel. I mean, you know, if Netflix gives you a bad recommendation, you're going to be angry at it. And that's an algorithm. So an algorithm is going to build a relationship on behalf of your business with your consumer. And if you're a brand marketer and you don't understand how to manage that, you're never going to be able to build your brand in the world of algorithms. So no matter who you are, in policy, in marketing, in law, in legal, and branding, and leadership, whatever your role is in an organization, you have to be AI literate. So whether you're starting your journey or you're well advanced in your journey, whether you're in function X or function Y, it doesn't matter. You've got to get AI literate, because a lot of the work, remember, the comparative advantage boundary has moved, and more work of the companies and governments is going to be done with AI systems.
Yeah. That's such an amazing point, that an algorithm will build the relationship with your customers, right? Such a powerful thing, but can go equally wrong. So thanks for sharing that. And you spoke about AI literacy. I know you teach a course around management in the age of AI at UCLA. And I want to get a cheat sheet for our audience today. So if you were to unpack that course and probably share 3 core insights that you want everyone to take away what would those be?
That's a favorite question of all my students. They're like, oh, can we
Just
avoid
un-
taking the course and not do all of the homework? And can you just tell us the bottom line? Uh, so, look, the bottom line is that in a business school, you learn so many things: accounting, marketing, branding, leadership, strategy, this, that, and the other. All of the theories that have been well established in the business world around most of these disciplines are kind of out of date and out of touch for industries that are being transformed by AI. Right? Data is, we say, the company's biggest asset. Show me a balance sheet on which data is a line item.
Okay.
Right? It doesn't exist. So if you can't even account for it, what are all these managerial accountants talking about?
Yeah.
They don't even account for the biggest asset of a company. Like, do I really need to look at a balance sheet? Like, does it even matter? Like, what is the book value of a company? Like, so how outdated and how completely out of touch all of what is being taught to an executive audience today or a managerial audience today is about AI or about business is because of AI is flabbergasting.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you look at competitive strategy, what is a first mover advantage, and does it apply to a data or an AI-rich industry or not? There's all kinds of interesting analyses on that you can do that are different from what you would ever be taught. Is AI an incumbent-friendly technology, or does it help disruption? The number of people using AI and disruption in the same sentence is mind-boggling, even though AI is a very, very incumbent-friendly technology.
Yeah.
We talked about marketing, branding, leadership. Talk about ethics. Talk about anything else that an executive or business leader or somebody else needs to know. What they can learn from the old books or the old case studies is kind of irrelevant. And so if you're in an AI-centric industry, you got to reevaluate every discipline in management very carefully, because a lot of the fundamentals have changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you explain to your students incumbent-friendly technology?
So an incumbent-friendly technology is a
Like
technology.
that the kids will understand. Like if we had to chart out, look at industries and applications of AIs. So if I have to sort of sort a couple of them, so if SaaS, AI can be on top of SaaS very easily, but then there could be, I don't know, mining, not so sure. So how do you sort of make that chart or that priority list?
So either an industry is data rich or not, either it can make a lot of decisions with AI or not, right? If those two things are true about an industry, then the industry is likely to be touched a lot with AI or transformed by AI. If that be true, then the application of AI will help the incumbents in that industry. If AI is irrelevant for an industry, then it's a totally different story.
Makes sense. I know we were talking about AI, but I'll be a bit selfish here. And Osho and I, while coming, were chatting about how you have done some amazing work on marketplaces, on ads. So we are really curious about both of these, because both of them are fairly mature ways of running a business right now, right? Like ads and marketplaces. We have seen countless examples, but very few people in the world have manage business lines with probably hundreds of billions of dollars at that scale, right? So I can maybe take the ads one, and Osho, you can talk about marketplaces. But if I, as a founder or a product builder, if I'm thinking about ads as a potential revenue channel for my business, what would your key advice be as someone who has done ads at Meta and Uber? What would your advice be to a founder getting started and wanting to build a business that relies on ads?
So usually businesses that rely on ads are businesses that grab the user's attention, right? And usually in the early days of your company, you're trying to make sure that you build a mousetrap that can attract more and more attention. And usually, and there's three usuallys in this, but usually, capital allocators to such companies don't really care about monetization in the early days. They care a lot more about how much attention can you grab. So if those three usuallys apply to you, then I wouldn't worry about monetization on day one. It's kind of a day two problem, right? Now, on the other hand, if you're building a business that's primarily an advertising business, like you're trying to actually be an ad tech provider, or you're trying to build a commercial search engine or something, then it's a different story.
Right.
And then you have to see how germane is it that the ad tech that you build in your company proves out the thesis of your company.
Right.
If the ads in your company, if the ads strategy or the ads work in your company doesn't help you prove out the thesis of your company in the first 3 years, then it's a distraction. If it helps prove it out, then it's an asset, then you should pursue it. So it's very simple. You should only ruthlessly focus on stuff that helps you establish that the mousetrap you're building actually works.
But what are some common mistakes that you see founders make when they try to build ads business?
An ads supported business or an ads business? Per se?
An ad supported business, say like businesses that rely on ads as a primary channel.
So the biggest mistake they make is that they think ads is easy, right? So when the time is right for your company to do ads, get some experts in. Don't think you can just do, oh, it's just a bunch of ads, right? It's not. It's fairly complicated. There's a lot of, it's, you know, like think about it this way. This is consumer internet companies at their finest. They sent their biggest brains in ads. They sent their best engineers on ads because that's where all the money was being made. And those brains and engineers have worked for almost 1.5 decades or 2 decades on building out ads theories, ads technologies, ads. They've tried 100 things, they've failed 100 times. All that knowledge exists. If you think it's easy, you're wrong, right? It's not.
Yeah.
So just make sure you get the right experts and you'll be off to the races, right? So if I'm a founder, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to focus on the first 5 milestones. I won't worry about ads. Okay, now I have to worry about ads. I'm reaching my 6th milestone. Okay, headhunting firm, find me the best expert.
Yeah.
And that's it. That should be your association with ads. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yes, yeah. Makes
But
sense.
do not underestimate how difficult and how complex it is to get right.
Yeah.
In fact, you'll see companies that made that, or founders that made that mistake, struggle to monetize.
Yeah, absolutely. Osho, you wanted to talk about marketplaces?
Yeah, just one question around marketplace. So like today, every service provider, every business has an online presence. They could be digitally found. So if today a college student or a founder wants to start a managed marketplace or a marketplace business, how can he or she ensure that there is no disintermediation later on?
I see. So let's define what a market is.
Okay.
You could define it as market's a community of buyers and sellers. You could define it as it's a place to be found, right? You could define it as a community of buyers and sellers that are bound by a certain code of ethics or a certain code of conduct, where if they violate it, they'll be penalized, right? And so on and so forth. Or that the cost of participating in the market is that you must follow an additional set of rules, right? Whatever those rules may be. So the more advanced you go down that path, the more value you create not more value, but like the more guarantees you create for the participants in the marketplace, whether they're buyers or sellers, right? So if you're going to be just the found layer, where you're just finding people, and sure, a lot of the search engines today do that job. So you're not adding much value beyond that. So why should anybody go to your marketplace?
That's true.
If you're just helping transactions, that is also kind of solved. You have huge marketplaces like Amazon and others that facilitate that. So what value are you adding? In fact, Amazon has A to Z guarantees, and different two-sided marketplaces offer different kinds of guarantees, rules, safety precautions, background checking, this, that, and the other. So they add that level of trust and safety in a market, right? So if you're thinking about building a marketplace business, you should think about, hey, why is my market the market where a seller wants to come and a buyer wants to buy? And what is the value prop of my market over and above others? Do I have a unique angle on it? If you do, then you can give it a shot. But you have to think first and foremost about how is my value prop as a market different? Not as a product, but as a market different. And it should be different enough for both buyers and sellers such that they both want to converge in that market.
Right. Dinkar, you have spent probably the last decade building AI products, probably even more. What makes you hopeful about this space? What are you personally excited about? What are things that you see that you think people should watch out for? Like, if you were to take a shot at the next decade, what are 2 or 3 major areas where you think there'll be major action happening?
So I think the standard of living globally will go up like crazy. Think about what happened with the printing press. All it did was it lowered the marginal cost of producing a book
And owning a book, maybe.
and owning a book and reading a book. And all of a sudden you had the Reformation and the Renaissance take place in Europe, and it pummeled Europe out of the Dark Ages.
Yes.
Right? If you think about the internet and how much economic impact it has had in India and other countries where people can now access and participate in a global economy much more freely, that's a huge, and all it did was it lowered the marginal cost of information dissemination to zero. What AI is doing is it's lowering the marginal cost of certain types of human judgments or human services to zero. And that means people all over the world should be able to get better education, better healthcare. They should be able to reskill no matter how old they are and where they are in their careers. They should, so many things should be available to them without having to pay for it. Yeah. And that means that people can consume way more than they consume in a positive sense in terms of self-actualization and development, way more than they've ever been able to do historically. Yeah. So the number one thing that AI will do in the world is it will transform the standard of living of millions and millions and billions of people that are otherwise deprived of high quality judgments and services. And I don't think we need to discuss what number 2 is.
Yeah.
Right? That number 1 bullet itself is so potent and so massive that you should all be thinking very hopefully about what AI can do for the world.
Absolutely. Dinkar, we are at the brink of time, but we usually do like a fun rapid fire towards the end. But before that, I was personally curious, how do you personally use AI in your day-to-day basis? Like, how does a day in Dinkar's life look like? But from a lens of, using AI to your advantage.
Well, so I actually try and not use it.
Oh, wow.
As much as possible, I try and use other tools or...
Why do you say that?
Well, so, philosophically speaking, AI is a very disempowering technology, right? So 500 years ago, every item that you own in your house or that you put on your person, every piece of clothing was unique. It was handmade. There were no factories before the Industrial Revolution. Then you go forward a little bit, and then, now basically we can buy a copy of each other's everything on some store somewhere, okay? Now, so that's a level of anonymization where you don't matter as a human being as much, right? Think about it. People in my classes tell me that they're big Spotify fans and they would never leave Spotify because they're established at Spotify. Spotify already knows what they like. Music is about the most human experience you can have. And they're letting an algorithm decide what they jive to, right? Dating algorithms are telling people whom they should date. Amazon's recommendation algorithms are telling you what you should buy. So what, if anything, is going to come of free will? Are you ever able to express yourself? Gmail is telling you how to complete your emails. So what are you? Are you some sort of like...
automated?
Yeah. Are we turning into automata that are numbers? Just, and there's a beautiful poem by W.H. Auden that you can go read called The Unknown Citizen. And it describes the fact that you can just go through life doing what algorithms and systems are telling you to do and be perfectly normal, right? So that's why I try and resist using AI systems for much of my decision making and things like that, because I want to retain as much expressivity and personality as possible everything that I do. Otherwise, these recommender systems and AI systems are telling people how to feel. They're telling people what to think. Fake news is a good example of that, right? Where people's minds have been turned into mush by AI systems that are constantly shoving fake news down their throats. They're telling people whom to love. They're telling people what to buy. They're telling people a lot of things.
That's true.
And the power, just think about it. Let's say this is a phone. Behind the phone is trillions of dollars of capitalist compute trying to figure out exactly how to get something from your time or your wallet. And over on this side is a human brain that has evolved for very different purposes over millions of years. So you cannot let these trillions of dollars of compute play such a significant role in pulling the puppet strings of your life that you stop leading it with force and will and purpose, right? And so for me personally, I use AI systems, like I will definitely use it for navigation, especially in a foreign city or something like that. So tasks that are dispassionate, that I attach almost zero personal value to, and I know that the systems have been built well in a responsible way, those are the two conditions in which I'm like, okay, you tell me how to drive over here in terms of the route to take or something like that. But anything else almost, I don't want to let an AI system guide me.
Yeah,
It's a
You still
it's a
shop
lifestyle
on
choice.
you still shop on Amazon?
I ignore its first 5 recommendations. I'm like, okay, show me what number 6 is.
That's such an amazing insight, Dinkar, and I wasn't expecting that answer at all. Almost makes me feel conscious about my ChatGPT usage, so I'll keep it under the limit. But yeah, on to the rapid fire. So some quick questions just to get to know you better as a person. What's your favorite productivity hack?
Cancel things on your calendar and make sure you have space to think.
Amazing. What's a book that you have gifted the most?
It's a book called Leadership BS.
Leadership BS. Do you know the author?
I don't know the author,
But yeah, people can look it up.
But basically, you know how many people say, "Oh, what advice do you have?" And "Oh, why don't you talk to this so and so person because they'll have great advice."
Right.
The book basically tells you there's no such thing, and you should follow your own judgment on
Judgment. I know this is a rapid fire, but I know you read a lot of books too. So maybe top 3 books of all time.
Another one is called Refuse to Choose. It's for people who like to do multiple things and don't want to just go deep and focus on one thing. So product managers generally fall into that camp. Another one is, forget its name, but it's about how, it's from an FBI hostage negotiator, describing how you should never...
never split the bill or something.
Yes,
never split the
never
difference.
split the difference.
Yeah.
Exactly. That one is a favorite, all-time favorite.
Yeah.
And then Original List is also very good to figure out how you can influence people in your direction.
Fantastic. If you could swap role with a CEO, who would that be and why?
If I could swap roles with a CEO, I'd swap roles with the CEO of the East India Company 5 years ago and tell him to go somewhere else.
Amazing. What does an ideal weekend for Dinkar look like?
Ideal weekend is, like doing a fair bit of exercise, cooking healthy, and enjoying something that is away from technology, in the arts or in nature or something like that.
Amazing. If you could have unlimited resources in the world, what problem would you choose to solve and why?
Our time on Earth is limited because, the solar system and Earth both come with an expiry date. So we should be focused relentlessly as a species on finding alternative habitats in the universe.
Amazing. That's as ambitious as it gets. Last question. This is something that I love to ask everyone. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
I would say that you'll be surprised at how less it matters what people around you think matters the most. Right?
Brilliant.
Like in the grand scheme of things, generally people tend to be on treadmills.
Yeah.
And those treadmills are, they're not moving. They're just there and they're,
churning out. Absolutely. Thanks so much, Dinkar. Really, really grateful for your time. Thanks, Osho, for co-hosting this with me. But we had a great time, and
Thank you.
we hope you have a fantastic time in India for the next few days. Thank you, Dinkar.
Thank you so much for having me.